devices, including mobile phones, should be switched to silent. For introductions, I'm Deputy Catherine Curtis, the Chair of the panel.
My name's Conrad Mott Labby. I am the Deputy Chair, Vice Chair of the panel.
I'm Deputy Helen Miles, panel member.
Deputy Mary Lahegara, Minister for Justice and Home Affairs.
Kate Bryden, Chief Officer for Justice and Home Affairs.
Nathan Fox, Associate Director of Justice Policy.
Morning, Chief Officer Robert Smith.
Mark Cockerham, Head of Customs and Immigration.
Okay, thank you everyone. And Deputy Porre can't be here today. So if I start with some of the questions. We've got a question about attacks on frontline staff to begin with. Minister, during the 22nd of August hearing, it was indicated that a media campaign regarding attacks on frontline staff would run in autumn of this year. So can you tell us what progress has been made on this since the last hearing?
Yes, of course. It is, as you rightly say, planned to have a campaign in the autumn, and that will happen imminently. The campaign is about raising public awareness in relation to the increasing trend of violence and aggression towards States of Jersey Ambulance and service teams. This campaign seeks to highlight the impact of such behaviour on emergency responders and ultimately on the community's ability to receive timely and effective care. The goal is to foster a culture of respect and support for those who are on the front lines saving lives. It is very important to me that the emergency services personnel can work effectively without fear of violence and aggression, and I'm concerned that incidents appear to have risen this year. We previously provided the panel with information which had come from an FOI of such incidents. And just for information of the public, there's been none as to the end of August on the fire service, and States Ambulance up to the 14th of June was 7. Customs and Immigration up to the end of August was 5, and the States of Jersey Police up to the end of July is 39. And as I said, obviously, that campaign is imminent, and I think it's very important that we do that work to turn the trend.
Yes, definitely, and I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, the police chief, or about tax on customs, or...
Regrettably, those numbers are now up to 46 police officers assaulted this year. In 2019, for the whole year, was 23. Fully in support with the Minister, States Jersey Police has a new head of communications, and we've already discussed what we'll do in terms of a media campaign, joining up, of course, with JHA colleagues as well, because it's across the board, all emergency services. But I am concerned about the number of assaults and that there is an appropriate deterrent if a police officer or any member of the emergency services is assaulted. And the final point is frankly the number of spitting incidents. Mm-hmm. So far this year, we've had 15 spitting incidents. Police officers are being spat at. One recently spat in the face. That has an enormous impact on those individuals, not least of which one officer, and it's going through the judicial process, so I won't provide too much details for reasons you'll understand, is now going through a course of tests to check that they have not got anything infectious. So I know the Minister's very keen on this. I think that we need to do more to not only explain what is going on, but also that there is an appropriate deterrent if an emergency services worker is assaulted whilst in the course of their duty.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Just briefly, no, I mean, we're fortunate in the sense that the number of incidents are, significantly lower than the States of Jersey Police. They tend to be in controlled environments, such as the harbour and the airport, so they're easy to deal with. That said, it doesn't mean that they're acceptable. Concerned, but not the situation the police are in.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, just as a backup, Minister, I was alarmed to see the UK figures as well, that don't seem to have changed a great deal, and it's concerning to our panel very much.
Yeah.
I think it is something that really needs to be highlighted, but also the consequences of those actions needs to be dealt with effectively.
Absolutely.
Yes, so if I now just ask a question about the ambulance headquarters as well, or the ambulance fire and rescue headquarters. So can you provide us with a status update on the feasibility work for this, whether it's on track to be completed by the end of the year, for example?
Obviously, I think we've already discussed, and the Council of Ministers has prioritised discussions in relation to gas, please, because obviously, as I said, in relation to fire, this is about a puzzle. There's obviously still good alignment between all of those parties that are involved, so obviously education, myself and the infrastructure minister. The long-term capital plan set out in the budget, or the government plan, highlights investment in Rouge Boyau from 2028. What's happened effectively in relation to capital projects, and I know we're going to talk about that later, but just to explain, is that we've looked at things that are actually can be achieved in the next 2 years, and we've obviously realigned some things which are going to take longer. So considering realistic estimates on delivery capacity in government and the construction sector to commence this programme of work, so that's why it's been pushed back. We will be working with Jersey Property Holdings to ensure that the current buildings are appropriately maintained in the meantime, because obviously both fire and ambulance are deteriorating buildings and they need maintenance, so that needs to be done. Further feasibility work will be undertaken in the remainder of this year in order to understand the programme and costs of the proposed solution. And as discussed previously, I'll be very happy to offer the panel a briefing as and when those discussions have been complete, so that you actually know what's coming forward. As I said, all of these things need to obviously be communicated to staff in those areas as well.
Yeah, that's great,
yeah.
thank you. So do you have any idea for a date when the feasibility work would be completed, if not by the end of this year?
It is aiming for the end of this year because it's using some funding that's only available in this year. It has started. The project team, very small project team, met with the ambulance chief and the fire chief on Monday to talk about the more detailed work they need to do. And as far as I know, they've got a plan to complete by the end of this year, which would mean we can come and brief you in the new year and also brief staff on what the feasibility study says.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. We're going to move on to questions about the justice policy, if I may. Minister, in your follow-up letter to the panel on the 3rd of September, you noted that there is no evidence of significance or problematic waiting times for court processes. However, from the data that was provided for adult remand court, there has been an increase in time of offence to the charge from 168 days in 2023 to 327 days in 2024, as well as an increase in the time between the charge to the first appearance in court from 22 days to 147 days. The panel would like more information regarding any steps being taken to reduce court waiting times or the duration defendants are waiting before their court next date.
Obviously, the panel are aware that I have no jurisdiction over the operations of the court, as it's a non-ministerial function, independently of the government, so I'm not closely involved. However, I do meet with the representatives of the court on a regular basis, and they keep me informed about the challenges and key issues that they observe. Obviously, it's something that I can discuss with them, but as I said, I have actually no jurisdiction over that particular part.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, yes, that bypasses that. Can you please provide details on what roles Justice and Home Affairs plays in determining budgetary matters related to legal aid?
Yes, recently, as I said, I've continued to meet with the legal aid team, and they and I have discussed various matters in relation to legal aid, and we will be reviewing, obviously, the various criteria in relation to sort of qualification of legal aid, alongside any increases that need to be made. So it's an ongoing project, and I am alongside them reviewing where we are with the legal aid system.
Do you intend to play a larger role in determining the legal aid budget in the future?
That's a difficult question, really. I think it's more about, it's their budget, if you like. The budget isn't for that part isn't held by me, but what we've been discussing is, as I said, you obviously have criteria for people who are able to claim it, how much, repayments, etc. So I'm working with them on that particular element of it, but the money isn't actually my money. It's actually would come. I believe it's actually the Treasury that provides that funding, not me. So I think that's where we can have a look at how we think the system should move forward, because obviously you can't have a system which stays still. So we need to potentially look at how things are and the criteria is looked at.
And it would be interesting for the panel, I'm sure, to have any information you can provide us on how legal aid is determined.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
As I said, obviously, depending on those reviews that we're currently looking at, then obviously that will be provided. Thank
you very much. Moving on now to, sorry.
Can I just to clarify, as Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, that in your role you can't have any influence over court processes, and I mean the general processes like court delays.
No, because that's not, I don't hold authority for that. It's actually the courts that hold the authority to that. Obviously, as the Justice and Home Affairs Minister, I can raise concerns with them, but it is them that run the court system, not me. They are a non-ministerial, so that means they don't have a minister that is because the courts have to be independent.
I do understand that, but then there's the processes overall as well, rather than the individual what's happening. So you can raise concerns.
Well, I can raise concerns with those individuals that actually monitor, regulate the courts, but I can't say you've got to have a certain timescale, but because it's not my department and I don't run them.
Okay, thanks.
Just ask a question there. Does the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs sit on the Criminal Justice Systems Board?
So yes, but it hasn't sat. The Criminal Justice Working Group is sitting regularly, quarterly, with subgroups now that have been reformed. And that is at the working level where these sorts of concerns would be discussed.
So who is involved in setting the strategic direction then of the criminal justice system work?
So the Systems Board isn't sitting at the moment.
Okay, so when is the Systems Board likely to sit?
This would remind me that it would be sensible for the Minister to write to the bailiff to ask.
Thank you.
Okay. Good, would be interesting. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the subject of youth justice strategy. In the previous hearing, you noted that the youth justice strategy was being finalised. Can you provide an update on where this will be completed, please?
Yeah, I met with the Basque Coordinator and Chief Officer of JHA in August to discuss the final draft of the Youth Justice Strategy. Both have spent time working with the key action stakeholders, associated executive leadership, heads of service, Children's Commissioner, and the safeguarding accountable officers to understand the feasibility of delivering the current proposed strategy with any additional resourcing allocated to it, which is the current situation. Having now worked through this, we have agreed a way forward which will see the youth justice strategy presented as a more strategic vision on the system which is aligned with the Basque framework and children and families plan. The strategy focuses on children first approach, which is what it should have always been, and sees the key drivers of success as ensuring that the youth justice system enables a partnership approach to encourage children in law-abiding and positive behaviours. Children are diverted away from the formal criminal justice system at the earliest point with appropriate support. Children who are engaged in serious or persistent conflict with the law go on to achieve positive outcomes, and children, families and communities and victims recover and move on beyond the impact of the harm they have experienced. A private briefing to Scrutiny is booked for the end of November, when we will discuss the strategy in more detail before it is formally published. The Basque Youth Justice Partnership Board is currently being formed from an existing group to drive the delivery of the strategy and the already formed BAS data partnership with support for this group. This will be coordinated by the BAS coordinator and accountable to myself through the BAS governance framework. So that's something that you will be briefed on at the end of November.
Okay, thank you. You're quite intrigued by the timeline, so it doesn't sound like it's going to be that much longer.
No.
The panel would also like more information regarding the new youth justice strategy. How will children be protected within the criminal justice system under the new strategy, do you think?
I think that the important thing is that when we look at how we're going to deal with youth and young people, that our focus, as I've said, is always on that young person. I think we need to really look at what starts before youth, effectively. And we need to start our programme of work long before we end up with young people diverting into certain behaviours. So I think that's what needs to be looked at. It needs to start and see what things we can put in place to actually assist us moving forward, so that we can actually divert before and assist and help families before we end up in this situation. Because I think that's what's critical. It's about actually starting from the beginning as opposed to trying to rectify something that's already happening. So I think that's quite clear, and I'm working very closely with the Children's Minister on this particular project. Obviously, he's also my Assistant Minister for Justice and Home Affairs as well, but it's critical that whatever strategies come out in relation to youth justice is a programme that starts earlier doors.
That's good. Can I just say we need to try and keep our answers and questions concise, because we haven't got a lot of time.
No, that's true. So we're expecting an update before the end of Q4 this year?
Absolutely.
Okay. Moving on then from that one. In your response letter from the 3rd of September, you indicated that early intervention strategies, particularly around youth crime, were being adopted in an effort to remove inefficient or reduce repeat issue incidents. The panel would like further information on this.
Sorry, say that again.
It's about the repeat incidents, in other words, reducing repeat incidents.
I think the answer to reducing repeat incidents is actually by starting the programme, as I've said already, earlier, and then actually dealing positively with those young people and their families earlier, so that we can prevent that that development going forward.
Yes, it's about early intervention, which was
everything's about early intervention.
Which was my next question. Are the repeat offences graded as to how severe the intervention might be?
I don't think we're actually at that point of to be honest. I mean, I think that's a difficult question. I think the thing is that incidents will always be graded, because some incidents are fairly minor and you can deal with those individuals in at a lower level. But I think when you've got serious incidents, you're going to have to consider how you're going to deal with those individuals, because you have to also be aligned to the fact that the defendant might be a young person, but quite often so are the victims of those particular events. And we have to look after and manage both sides of that equation. So it's not only about the offender and how the offender's dealt with, but we need to positively deal with those victims and ensure that those victims are getting the care and everything that they need as well. So we must never forget that there are two sides to this particular event. It's the perpetrators, but also the victims, and we need to ensure. And it's not only young people that are the victims; it's other members of the community as well. So we need to positively deal with every aspect of those things.
Sure. Thank you, Minister. I think that's my section. Yeah.
So on a different subject now, Minister, as the competent authority for fuel, electricity and gas, can you please explain how you are informed and kept up to date on gas risks around the island?
Okay, as you're aware, my role is in relation to the sort of outage when there's a disruption. Yeah. So that's where the emergency comes into it. The other time it's actually sits with a different minister. But we are continually updated and better prepared. It's a continual event where we meet in relation to our resilience and other events. And the Chief Officer for Justice and Home Affairs actually probably can provide a little bit more on that.
So Emergencies Council meets periodically, where ministers have mainly been updated over the summer on the work we've been doing on gas contingency generally. Council of Ministers is due to be updated at the beginning of November on the substance of that work, which mainly revolves around scenario planning for what happens if we have another outage. It's almost exactly a year since we had that one in October last year. We've done a lot of lessons learnt work as a result of that and come up with a new gas response plan, which actually builds in the lessons learnt from lots of incidents, actually not just the gas one, particularly in terms of community support, information of what utilities are actually where, and where vulnerable customers are, and in particular also working with Jersey Electricity on what their part would be in helping us cope with a gas outage of some sort. There is also work on what the more sort of corporate structures look like, which we could perhaps tell you in a private briefing another time rather than in a public one for reasons I think you'll probably understand. But the ministers are updated on that pretty regularly as well. The mainstay of that work is led under the Minister for Infrastructure rather than the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, but the senior officers work collaboratively on it.
Okay, so that new gas response plan, that's already complete?
It's very nearly finalised, yeah. That they're not publicly published plans because they've got a fair degree of sensitive information in them for responders to use, but certainly I'm sure we could share it with the panel in confidence.
Thank you. So you've answered my next question, I think, about what you're doing to prepare for a crisis. This would be in the plan.
Yeah.
What is currently being done to ensure islanders' safety? Is that covered by the plan or is there more needed?
So the safety work is more a sort of separate strand from that, really. The duty there is with the risk owner, so the Island Energy Group, and we're in very close contact with them. There is obviously still the investigations in relation to specific incidents underway, about which, again, we wouldn't talk publicly. And the Infrastructure and Environment Department are also working very closely with IEG, where they're doing roadworks, for example. So there's a big programme in Bath Street at the moment, which is winding us all up, but is there for a reason, to make sure that those connections are safe and sound to new developments, etc. And we're also aware that IEG are doing a remediation programme to make sure that where they've disconnected, those connections are fully safe and are further away from properties than they have been previously.
Okay, thanks. Are there any updates that you can share with the panel regarding the tragedy at Haute de Mont?
It's probably for Robin rather than...
As you will appreciate, and as the Chief Officer has just alluded to, we're at a delicate period with this because matters are with the Law Officers Department. But as you will have seen in the media last week, that the majority of the file is now with law officers for them to consider any charging decisions.
Okay, right. Thank you. Helen?
To me. Thank you. I've got some questions about the Article 36 suite, place of safety, and it's just really, Minister, if you can give us an update, please. This is great news.
I'm very excited, and I have to say this, I know I have to be quick, but part of that Article 36 bed was as a result of the health panel from 2018 to 2022 and the extra funding that was given. But I can happily say that as of September, it is now opened, although it hasn't actually been used yet.
Which is a good thing. I mean, I know there are people in this meeting that have had a long history with this. Certainly the introduction of the suite has not been quick, but we accept and understand that. We now have an island facility that I think is world class. And I'm pleased to say, as of yet, we haven't needed to use it. There have been some incidents where there have been some additional complications with the individuals concerned, which has preempted them from not going to the suite, i.e. to the hospital instead. But that facility provides us with the very best care for people who are patients, who are not criminals. That said, for example, as of today, we have had so far 654 mental health related incidents. That's around about 70 odd a month, but that's a drop of 17%. I think that the mental health suite will be used. Of course it will be used, but the demand we have, which are not all Article 36s, which require them to go in there, is still quite a significant demand, albeit it has dropped significantly, largely, exclusively as a result of the relationship we have with Andy Weir and his mental health team.
Thank you. Has staffing the site up at, I mean, you haven't used it yet, I suppose, but are you expecting that once the suite starts to be used, it will have a positive impact on the resources of States of Jersey Police?
I mean, that is my expectation. There is a very detailed and agreed MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding between us and about how we will deliver effectively the detainee or patient into the suite. And it is my expectation, and I'm confident it's Andy Weir's expectation, that there will be staff there. Otherwise, it will sort of nullify the reasons why we've got a suite. So we have.
And there'll be staff there 24/7.
That is my understanding, Deputy.
Okay, thank you. Are States of Jersey Police monitoring how the suite is being used?
The Memorandum of Understanding, MOU is actually easier to say, I've discovered, is incredibly detailed. In fact, when I saw a copy of it, I was astonished about the detail within it. Suffice to say that within that is about how we will collectively monitor together its usage and its benefits, etc.
Good, that's all good news. Thank you. My next set of questions are around the role of the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs in relation to corporate parenting. So can you explain to us whether your responsibilities are similar to or different from other ministers when it comes to being a corporate parent?
I think, obviously, from my point of view, I think the Corporate Parenting Board, I think both mine and the Minister for Children, our responsibilities, I would say, are probably higher than those of other members of that board. Because, of course, from a corporate parenting perspective, the Minister is obviously responsible for the children, particularly those under the care of the government or under, his department. But of course, from my perspective as the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, and having responsibility for the police, then obviously those young people are going to come into my domain more likely than they are to others. So from my point of view, I actually think my responsibilities are greater. I mean, obviously education is probably another one that's quite high, as is health. But I think the thing, in relation to the Corporate Parenting Board, I actually think my responsibility is quite high with the Children's Minister, because we are responsible for the young people, but particularly those that come into the care of the police, and to ensure that making sure of their welfare. So I actually think my responsibilities are higher, if I'm honest.
Thank you. Do you think the states could improve at all as a corporate parent? And if so, in which areas?
I wouldn't like to actually be specific about areas as such, but let's make no bones about this. I think we can always improve. I think there's always an ability for us to improve how we deal with young people. And my view is, in relation to being a corporate parent, is that we need to ensure best outcomes for young people. And being a corporate parent is like being a parent for your own child. You need to make sure that you treat them with dignity and respect, but you also need to make sure that you, when you are doing things, that you are considering their welfare at all times, because I think sometimes that can actually not always be the case. So I think it's very important for us to ensure that we all work together on that scenario, but also linking in very closely with the new Children's Commissioner as well, because I think for all of us, we will always need to work on this. It's never going to be perfect, because let's be fair, that doesn't happen. But I think it's very important, and obviously Robin is part of the corporate parenting board as well, and we all contribute to that. But I actually think that we can always improve. I don't think we'll ever be in a perfect situation.
Okay, thank you. Just a specific question. Does the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs keep specific records of individuals in care?
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of, but I think obviously the Children's Minister would have,
Would have those
and
records.
that person is my Assistant Minister. So hopefully, and can I just say, that's why we actually felt that it was quite beneficial for that link, even though obviously he's got a very high profile portfolio as well. We actually thought that there was benefits to that.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to an update on the Violence Against Women and Girls report. Can you just give us an update as to the status of the VORG report recommendations tracker?
Blimey. Okay. Yes. Have you actually seen the tracker?
No.
Okay. Right. Okay. I don't think there's probably any reason why we
No,
can't
we'll
confidentially
write and send it to you.
Send it to you, because obviously there's 77 recommendations,
Yeah.
and there are timelines that literally go from now all the way through till June 2026. So I'm conscious of time. So if you're happy, we'll actually provide you the update in confidence, if that's okay.
Happy with that. Thank you. I'm going to hand you back to.
Sorry, it might just also be worth adding that we've penciled in a session on the 21st of October.
Which some have already
Yes.
accepted.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and that's trying to get the Constable Shenton-Stone's proposition for annual reporting to line up effectively with
Yes, of course.
the government plan
Yeah.
cycle. So more to follow.
Yes,
And,
thank you.
and thank you for the letter as well, which gave us an update on
Yes.
this work. Yeah.
Just remind us, and we'll always try and do that.
So I have some questions now about the work permit review. Minister, what update can you provide in regard to the revised work permit policy?
There's obviously been more information in relation to the employers and employees. What is in the policy, and forgive me, but you may already be aware of this, but we've moved from 12 months to 6 months for somebody to be able to switch employer, because we felt that that was quite a valuable part. We've providing clarity on what's on maintaining and accommodating dependents without recourse to public funds. So there's been a look by the department to ensure that somebody who is able to bring their dependents with them, they are able to actually maintain a proper, that those dependents can be well looked after, because obviously sometimes that somebody might come in with a job at a certain salary, but they may not be able to pay for all of the on-costs, if that makes sense. We've provided more signposting and links to information about living, working and access to healthcare in Jersey. So, because I think what the panel's view was that there needed to be a little bit more information so that when people decide whether to come to Jersey or not, it was clearer about what was going to happen. The thresholds have gone up to 30,000. We've adopted more of the sort of more standard occupational classifications, so that we more align with the UK from that, because there were some classifications that weren't in our work permit, so some of the classifications have changed. We are enabling those on skilled work permits now to also take supplementary part-time employment of no more than 20 hours a week. And as I've already said, in relation to the temporary and skilled work permit holders, they must advise their employers of their intention to seek supplementary part-time employment. Sometimes they may have to ask permission of their employer, but that's only if that contract actually says that. But it's about advising them. As much as anything, it's about so that the employer, the initial employer, knows that they're working other hours as well. And obviously from a welfare point of view, that is quite critical. And we're looking at the sort of, we're still ongoing work in relation to the timescales of when they can, lengths of time that people can be here, then they have to leave and all of those sorts of things. So we're still actually reviewing all of that. And I don't know whether Mark can sort of add anything to that, really.
No, I think you've covered it, Minister. Briefly, the focus is probably worth saying that the actual framework, the routes in terms of construction, agriculture and hospitality haven't changed. It's more the emphasis on the welfare of the employee and the information that's available. That's really the fundamental sort of changes that have taken place. We're heading for about 3,500 work permits for 2024, which is obviously an enormous increase over previous years. It's important that the employees, can be sure what information is available, particularly around healthcare and employee rights.
Yeah, and will there be, are there any plans for like a place to go, a sort of help desk, an area of information specifically about work permits?
Well, I think
difficulties?
the information's obviously is provided on the websites in relation to immigration for people when they're not here. But in relation to people that have sort of arrived in the island, we're now signposting them to ELS. And so there's actually a help desk in ELS rather than CLS. Sorry.
I was
Yeah.
wondering about that.
Yeah. No, I must apologise.
Yeah.
Yeah, CLS. I
Yeah.
get confused with all the
Yeah.
different short-term things. But yeah, I mean, the websites have been updated so that information should be better provided. I mean, obviously there's still things that will, need to continue to make sure that information is continued to be updated and that people have got access to that information, really.
Okay, and if they look at the website, they'll be able to see that there is a place they can go and speak to someone at CLS. Yeah.
That's not actually on the website as such. What we're finding is I've mentioned the volume that we're dealing with. That the issues that do arise, particularly around the employer, are comparatively small for that volume of people. We generally find that when we do get cases that come to our attention, as in immigration, they're not necessarily immigration-related issues, they're more employer issues. So we direct them to CLS or indeed JAX if we feel that's appropriate.
Okay, and I was going to ask why has the policy been delayed, but is it because there's still this timescales and so on being looked at?
The delay was initially because some other members of the Council of Ministers wanted to there were certain elements of it that we still need to sort of iron out, I think is a good way of putting it.
Okay.
Yeah.
During the drafting of the new work permit policy, were local stakeholders consulted in the development of communications?
Just to emphasise, it's not a new policy as such. The framework is pretty much unchanged, so it's more tinkering with the terminology that's used. But to answer your question, yes, Chamber of Commerce, Jersey Hospitality Association, Jersey Business, these sorts of organisations have been consulted, along with some of the representative groups, such as Friends of Africa, Caritas.
Okay, so have any actual migrant workers on Jersey been able to share their views and been involved in the drafting of the policy?
Not individual workers, no, as such. We've looked more towards the industry bodies and the representative groups.
Okay, is there any plans to try and survey them and find out their thoughts? Or?
I think by our interaction with people like the Friends of Africa, and there's obviously the group in relation to Kenyan work permit holders and Caritas and others, and I have actually got scheduled in to meet with Caritas in relation to this. I'm meeting regularly now with the Salvation Army as well, because I think the thing is that we need to begin to understand, and so I think that if they've got any sort of issues, they will go to those organisations, and I think that's probably a good link for us to have, because that way we'll get a better understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, before we move on,
Yeah.
Mark, I'd be intrigued, I wonder if the public would be as well, the increase in the permit holders to 3,500. In which industries are primarily engaged in this, do you think?
It's mainly hospitality.
Hospitality?
But I think the sort of thing to emphasise is that you know, quite often Brexit is cited as the reason. It is partially the reason, but it's not the whole reason. So what we have seen is an enormous change since COVID in terms of migration patterns. I think a lot of European workers that used to come to the island have decided not to,
Indeed.
as a result of leaving, but also as a result of cost of living and wages. So what we have seen, as you probably know, is a move for the island to go further and further afield to bring in workers. So that's, I think, is collectively the reason for the increase.
Sure.
But it's mainly hospitality, to answer your question.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Amy?
Yeah, thank you. I've now got some questions on the electronic travel authorisation scheme, and I just wondered if you could give us an update regarding the implementation of the policy, and when that's likely to happen.
Obviously, ETA is being rolled out by the UK in phases. The ETA for the Gulf states is now live. The rest of the world, excluding the EU, will come online in Q4 of 2024. UK nationals will need an ETA from Q2 in 2025, and the Crown dependency schemes will be launched in Q4 of 2025. And obviously JASIS continue to sort of engage with the Home Office in relation to the implementation of this. I think just as a point before is that the ETA is not an immigration permission but a permission to travel. It's aimed at non-visa nationals who do not require a visa to enter the common travel area as visitors. It must be applied for before travelling using the ETA app or web page. I mean, customers will be required to provide their details and answer some security questions. There's a fee of £10 and ETA will be valid for 2 years. What I would like to say in relation to the electronic travel authorisation, I think what this will do is actually, from my perspective as the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, it will actually make our borders a lot more secure, because obviously you'll know who's travelling and also there'll be far more detail than what there is now.
Currently.
But I don't know if Mark has got anything to add to that, really.
No, just to emphasise that it will definitely increase border security. As the Minister said, it's not an immigration permission, it's permission to travel, but obviously preventing people from travelling at the point of departure, getting on the plane or the boat before they even arrive at the border, having been screened through various security checks, has got to be an advantage. And this is the way the world is moving. Obviously, we see the equivalent in Europe with the ETIAS scheme. We know that places like America have had their ESTA scheme in place for a long time, but countries all around the world are moving to this system now.
So how is it going to impact the carte d'identité scheme?
Well, I think the thing is that when the system's rolled out, it depends whether that card is actually workable with the system that we have. And if it isn't workable, then it's going to be difficult to do something about it from the point of view that it's an electronic data system. And if the card isn't conducive with that system, then I don't know if Mark wants to sort of talk more about the relationship that they've had with the UK in relation to the system.
I think there's three big barriers to overcome for the scheme to continue. The first is obviously from a policy perspective. If, for example, Jersey was to be the only place in the common travel area that was to allow people to come in without a passport, that could be an issue, not just for the UK but for us as well. I think costs could be quite a consideration as well. Tinkering, if you like, with UK systems could be extremely expensive. And then finally, obviously, there's the security aspect of allowing people in on an identity card as opposed to a passport. I'm not saying that from my point of view, that it can't continue, but it's going to be quite problematic, I think.
Is any work being done? We know that there's an issue over French people having passports. There's a very low take-up of passports in France. Have you had any conversations with either the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development or Minister for External Affairs, External Relations, to liaise with the French about raising the uptake of people using passports?
I've actually, only in the last 24 hours, had a meeting with External Relations Minister. I've had a number of meetings with the Sustainable Economic Minister, and I've highlighted the fact I thought that it was important for us as a jurisdiction to actually discuss with central government in France, because obviously we are working with the people in Brittany and Normandy, because those are the people that are probably coming to Jersey on the day trip. So I think it's important to actually speak to the central government in France as well. I've done that, but also I've on my visit to the JSIS in recent months, I watch people coming and going, and there is a mix of both passports and ID cards that are used by day trippers. And it's interesting because I believe, and I could be factually incorrect, but I believe that the new French consulate said that actually I think French people do have passports. So I don't know whether what facts are correct, if that is correct. Do you know what I mean? So I don't actually know how many people in France have passports or not. But I think the question to ask is that we as travellers, when we go to the UK, we go on a plane. Do we take a passport or do we use our driving licence? We use our driving licence because it's a less expensive item should we lose it to replace. So I think more work needs to be done in relation to actually how many people we would lose, because I believe the data, and it's off the top of my head because I haven't got that particular data, but I believe from my recollection there was 17,800 that came in on ID cards comparative to over 30,000 that came in on passports. Was it last year or the year before, I believe. So I think the thing is that there is obviously, it would be a bonus if you can continue that, but if we can't, then we won't be able to. And I think we need to identify that. We need to work to see if we can rectify the position. And I fully agree with you in relation to the work needs to be done to see what happens in France and the rest of Europe. But I also would make the point that if you have somebody living in France whose partner isn't French and has another European ID card, they can't come to Jersey, so they would have to travel with a passport. So I think the dynamics...
That's the way the current system works already, isn't it?
Yes, that's the point. So I think the thing is that it's a difficult one to push into the circle, if that makes sense. So I think there's more work that needs to be done.
Thank you.
But we've got, hopefully, still a little bit of time to see if we can,
Just really briefly, what we definitely have seen at the borders is more and more French day trippers coming in on passports as opposed to identity cards. I think just a natural progression. Yeah.
Thank you.
May I ask a supplementary? I mean, I've got a very large event happening next year with a lot of people coming from France. The Jumelage Games in June. Do you think there still is a barrier for French people to gain a passport as opposed to the ETA? Is it easier to get the ETA so that we can pass that information on?
Sorry, I don't know. An ETA isn't a passport.
No,
No.
but it's an alternative, is it not?
But
No.
you need a passport to get it.
get it.
That's
I
what the
see.
problem is.
My
That's the
problem is,
problem.
yeah.
So if you haven't got a passport, if the ID card doesn't have the same sort of numbering as a passport, then you won't be able to get an ETA. You won't be able to get an ETA, you
I
won't be able
see.
to travel.
Thank you very much for
But
explaining.
the ID scheme is still in place until next September.
Next September,
Yeah.
so we're covered.
We're pushing it as far as we can.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mark?
Yeah, my last, I think it's the last
Yeah, I
topic of
think
the
it
day.
is, yeah.
A real friend of mine, considering the rally is on Friday. It's about speed cameras, which we've playfully used on the rally. But Minister, can you please provide an update on what has been done in regard to speed limit reductions? Will speed cameras in high traffic pedestrian areas be used, etc.?
Obviously, we are proceeding to implementing, and I'll ask Robin to speak in a minute, in relation to the use of speed cameras on a limited basis. This sits actually with the Minister for Infrastructure because they have responsibility for the roads, even though we obviously have responsibility for the policing of those roads. There's now been released the budget and it has gone through its necessary checks and balances, namely the procurement and tender processes. And they've been, that minister has been working hard to move this along as quickly as possible. The suppliers received the official order and are now in the process of fulfilling that. And I think it's 12 weeks.
That's right, Minister. First of all, I am grateful for Scrutiny's continued interest in things speeding, whether they're speed cameras or otherwise, because it just reflects what we've said before, that reflects the island's view of concerns around speeding that continue. And of course, we know that our honorary officers, honorary colleagues do an awful lot in the parishes to try and reduce speeding, but so we are now much closer to getting a speed camera, just the one. It is a really good example of how collaboration can work between, if you like, two ministries. Also, the Chief Officer, Andy Skate, has been involved in trying to... I've become more familiar with a procurement process. I'll say no more than that, but there are some proper checks and balances that need to be held, evidently. I understand that. So, yes, we've now got a lead-in time of 12 weeks, and I'm grateful to the Minister for I&E and indeed the Chief Officer, where there's been genuine collaboration. So we will focus on the high harm, high risk locations. We have good data now where we will deploy a camera into those locations, properly calibrated. But yes, in the next few weeks, maybe first deployment will be in the early part, maybe January of 2025.
It's very good news, Chief Officer. From my own point of view personally, as a connoisseur, and I'm sure all of my colleagues that may be listening will be pleased for me to represent them, is I would say that 60% of all the issues we have in a parish relate to speeding. In fact, I had a surgery yesterday with my colleagues, and again, we had many issues about speeding and associated with many of the problems about, personal security, etc., is related to the older generation and how they get in and out of their properties with speeding. And we were thrilled at the committee at Conotab to be given a presentation on this mobile camera. A bit alarmed about the cost, but it's very important to us on our main roads because speed cameras have limitations about how they can be used. So we're very encouraged by this whole process.
Yes, so just to confirm that it might be a new January 2025?
That's when we see the first deployment.
Yeah, and will the public be given some information about what to expect of the process of?
The best way to do this is explaining it to islanders, explaining what we're going to do, and involving islanders in the process. It isn't about trying to catch the baddies all the time. It's about an education process, which I think would have much more value actually than a camera. But the camera is expensive. The camera is latest technology. But I would hazard to guess preventing one serious crash will easily pay for that camera, let alone the public tragedy or whatever would come with it.
Has there been an assessment of the administration costs of dealing with the people that you're going to catch?
As I think you know very well, Deputy, the easy bit actually is the camera. The hard bit is what goes into the back end. And that is how would we deal with the administration costs and all the rest of it. So the answer to that question is yes. We are sort of jumping into the darkness a bit with it, but we will be calibrating the camera to such that we will just get the more extreme or the more concerning speeding rather than, a few miles over the limit, as it were.
Do you anticipate that there's going to have to be any changes to the road traffic law?
It's too early to say. What I would like to be able to do is use the camera with our I&E colleagues maybe for the first 6 months and then say, well, what have we learnt? Have we seen a reduction in speeding? Bearing in mind it is just one camera and we would have dozens and dozens of locations. But I would, again, with the help of Scrutiny, the Minister, etc., or ministers, see this as a learning process to see how we might be able to better do it in the future.
Can I just ask one final question? Is PC Flats still around?
PC Flats continues to be very flexible. He never goes sick. never takes leave, and is regularly deployed.
Just haven't seen him for a while.
I can arrange for it to be near your home.
It's impressive.
I think the scrutiny panel should treat him out for a meal, Chief, because he's looking very thin.
It can be arranged.
Okay, unless there's anything else anyone wants to add, I think we're done, we're finished. And it is, I can't see, yes, we're just about on the right time. So thank you very much, everyone.